But Lincoln was a very different place back then. It was a very quiet town. That night, in April of 1775, there was grand drama right here in Lincoln. Grand drama indeed. Well, let me tell you how it all began. It was 2 years before, 2 years, 1773, the British government had imposed a tax on tea. Now, Parliament had no right to tax us, no right at all. What a tax on tea. It was annoying, but Parliament had imposed these taxes before, and we'd always been able to push them back on it, and they retreated on them. So we here in Lincoln, we signed a pledge among ourselves that we wouldn't buy or consume teas, and we pretty much left it at that. But the patriotic citizens of Boston, they had a different idea. When a shipment of that tea came out to the harbor, they went down to the dockside, they went out to the boat, and they took all of the tea and they dumped it in the harbor. It took them hours to do it, and it was an immense wealth of tea. Immense, far beyond my imagining. Well, I didn't really approve of that. I didn't, but that's what they did. It was what happened next that really got me angry. When the British government heard about the dumping of the tea, they decided to punish the entire city of Boston. And so they closed Boston Harbor to all trade. And that threw thousands of people out of work. Thousands. Sailors, dock workers, and merchants. And then Parliament decided to send a British Army general to be governor of Massachusetts, and decided to suspend our town government. And to make sure we obeyed all of this, Parliament sent 5,000 redcoat soldiers to occupy the city of Boston. This was an outrage. A tax on tea is one thing, but military rule over the colony of Massachusetts, a colony that had governed itself for 150 years, this was intolerable. So there was great anger in April of 1775. I'll admit, great anger on both sides. The British government thought that there were some Americans who were seeking to destroy the British Empire by declaring American independence. We had no such intention then, no such intention at all, not then. But we on our side were persuaded that the British government intended to reduce all of the colonies to slavery. Why else would they impose military rule on Massachusetts and suspend our town governments and flood the city of Boston with soldiers? Oh, it was a time of great anger in April of 1775. All of Massachusetts was like a keg of dry gunpowder, and the only question was, what would be the spark that would cause it to explode? You and I now know that that spark was struck on the night of April 18th, when 700 redcoat soldiers came out of their garrison in Boston, crossed the Charles River, and began their march out to Concord to seize the guns and the ammunition that patriotic Americans had stored there in order to protect our liberties. You and I know that now. But imagine what it was like for people of Lincoln back in April of 1775. We didn't know what was going to happen, and we didn't know how it was going to end. So let me take you back to that evening in 1775. The weather was cool and mild, much like tonight. The sky was clear, the moon was high and above the horizon and just past full, casting its light all across the fields. Of course, the fields were cleared back then for pasture and for farmland, and off in the distance you could see houses. But the houses were dark, because Lincoln was a farming community back then, and farm folk have to get up early in order to do their chores. So the houses were dark. Lincoln was quiet. All of Lincoln was asleep. But up on the road in North Lincoln, the road that runs through Lincoln from Lexington to Concord, there in the shadows of the moonlight lurked a patrol of British officers who had come to set a trap. They knew that as soon as all of those redcoat soldiers marched out of garrison in Boston, that the alarm would be spread to the countryside by patriotic American alarm riders who carry the word The regulars are out. The regulars are out. The British knew that. And so earlier that evening, they had come out on their horses looking for a place to set a trap for those riders. And they found that place in North Lincoln, not 2 miles from where we are right here in Lincoln. Well, along about 2 o'clock in the morning, along came 3 of those riders. One of them was Paul Revere. You probably have heard of Paul Revere. One of them was William Dawes. Not so many people remember William Dawes. And the third one was a young doctor who lived in Concord, and he had been in Lexington courting his sweetheart, and he was headed home at 2 o'clock in the morning. And he paired up with Dawes and with Revere, and together the 3 of them began their ride from Lexington through Lincoln to Concord, stopping at each house as they came along to spread the alarm. The regulars are out. The regulars are out. Well, they had just crossed the border from Lexington into Lincoln, and they rode straight into the British trap. Paul Revere tried to get away, but there were too many British officers around him. They grabbed the reins of his horse, and that was the end of Paul Revere's ride. William Dawes saw what was happening, and he wheeled his horse around, and he galloped back toward Lexington as fast as he could go, and he got away from the British soldiers who were pursuing him. But a little further along, his horse spooked and threw him to the ground, and his horse took off, and there was William Dawes walking back to Lexington. So who now is going to carry the alarm to Concord? It was that doctor, yes, it was the young doctor, Samuel Prescott. He knew the way very well, and so when he saw what was happening, he spurred his horse and he leaped it over a stone wall and got onto a path that went down into a swamp. And the British soldiers tried to pursue him, but they couldn't see where he was going, and he made his escape. And about a mile further up, he came back to the road by the house of Samuel and Mary Hartwell, and he gave them the alarming news. The regulars are out. The regulars are out. Samuel Hartwell was a sergeant in the Lincoln Minutemen. He was my sergeant in the Lincoln Minutemen, and he knew what to do. He grabbed his musket, he got his cartridge box, he took some food, and he got prepared to march. According to the story they tell, it was his wife, Mary Flint Hartwell, who then did a very brave thing. She threw a shawl around her shoulders against the chill of the night, and she went out into that moonlit road, and she walked toward the British patrol, skirting along a stone wall in case she encountered a British soldier, and she did that so that she could take the alarm to her neighbor. And it's a good thing she did, because her neighbor was William Smith, the captain of the Lincoln Minutemen. And all that happened on this April night, not 2 miles from where we are now, right here in Lincoln. Well, picture in your mind what Captain Smith did at that point. He saddled his horse, he bid farewell to his wife and to his 3 small children. He couldn't know when he would see them again. He couldn't know if he would ever see them again. And then he swung into the saddle and he galloped here to the center of Lincoln to have the church bell rung to rouse the Lincoln Minutemen and get them ready to march. And all that happened right here. And on a night like tonight, when I tell this story, all these memories do come back to me, just as it happened so many years ago. The sound of the hoofbeats off in the distance, Captain Smith riding in here, the clanging of the bells, musket shots to carry the alarm to the countryside, the fifes and the drums, and the Lincoln Minutemen running from their houses in answer to the alarm, and all of Lincoln is up and to arms. Imagine if you were here that evening in April of 1775, waiting, watching, wondering. The most important day in American history was about to begin right here in Lincoln. The most important day in American history right here in Lincoln.